welcome back. Today I'm going to do an overview of the books that I read in November of 2021. Let's go. Here are the 5 books I finished in November. My overview of the books have spoilers, so beware if you haven't read them. Before we get into it, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you want more book videos. The first book I finished in November was The Love Hypothesis. So I am so happy that I read this book. This book has been hyped up since its release. Everyone's saying it's so great, and this one totally lived up to the hype for me. I thought it was just fantastic. So it's a fake dating trope book between Olive, who's a PhD student, and Professor Dr. Adam Carlson. He's not her teacher, though, by the way. So they have this fake relationship, and we get to see their relationship form throughout the book. And then of course we have like the happy ever after. And leading up to the happy ending, the author did a really great job of showing the connection between the main characters. And I really loved reading their dialogue throughout the book. It was just such a delight to read. And I did do a full video review on this book, so I'm not going to rant and rave about how much I love it. If you want to see that, I will link that video in the description below, because I really enjoyed this one. The second book I finished this month was Daughters of Sparta. So I thought this was a really good idea for like a mythology type retelling book. We get to see the point of views from Helen of like Sparta/Troy, and then also her sister Clytemnestra from when they were children, and then we kind of jumped through their lives until the point right after the war ended. I did find the book difficult to read at times. The author really put an emphasis on how women were treated in this era, and we kind of saw how like consistently Helen and Clytemnestra were just really unhappy, and that did make this book kind of like a drag to read. Like it wasn't like a lighthearted, fun read. Overall for the book, I did think that Clytemnestra did steal the show. I expected Helen's story to be more interesting, since she is like Helen, of Troy, the one that like started this great war. But honestly, Helen was just a bit like whiny for my taste. And since she's known in history as like this larger than life character, almost like she's like this great legend, I had expected her character to be the same, but instead the author wrote her as like very lackluster and almost a little bit dumb. So overall, I was just kind of disappointed with Helen's character. I just had expected a retelling of her character to be just more like powerful. So overall, I did enjoy the book. Like writing style wise, it was really easy to understand and really easy to get into. And I did like that the book covered such like a wide time period of the sisters' lives. The third book that I finished this month was The Guest List. So this book is a suspense novel, and it takes place during like this posh wedding that's on a secluded island. And right away, when starting the book, we learn that like something bad has happened at the wedding reception. And so throughout the remainder of the book, it's told from different point of views, the day leading up to the wedding and then during the wedding reception, leading toward like this grand reveal of letting us know what happened at the reception. And from the different point of views we got, we heard from the bride, the bridesmaid, the plus one, the best man, the wedding planner, and then near the end, we also got a few chapters from the groom. So I actually got this book from a garage sale for like $1, and I was like, oh, sweet. And it's been sitting on my shelf forever, and I've been like waiting to get around to reading it. And I just decided to listen to it on audiobook because I didn't feel like sitting down and like actually reading it because I had other things going on and other things to read. So I listened to it on audiobook, and they had a whole bunch of different people reading like the different chapters and everything. So every character had like a different voice. So audiobook wise, it was well done. I did like how each chapter was narrated by a different person. But overall for me, the book did not live up to the hype. I was expecting to really like it, and I was excited to listen to it because I thought it'd be like fun and suspenseful. But I didn't find this book to be suspenseful at all. It was just so boring, and having the book basically like take place over just one night made the book feel like just absolutely nothing happened. From the start, we know that something bad happened at the wedding reception, but the lead up to the actual wedding reception and finding out what happened was just so dreadful. All of the characters were super whiny and super annoying, and I didn't care for any of them, and I hated having to listen to them bitch about their problems throughout the entire book. My absolute least favorite character was the bride, Jules. Listening to her talk about her fucking wedding was dreadful. Like, she wanted it to be perfect, and she wouldn't stop talking about it, and I just found it so insufferable. Like, by a few chapters in, I was already so over the wedding setting, and anytime we would get back to her sections in the book, I would just be like, oh my gosh. I would just roll my eyes and be like, okay, let's like suffer through this. Like, I don't care that you want your wedding to be perfect. You're being a bridezilla and you're being annoying. I think that I struggled with it because even for my own wedding, I barely put any effort into planning it. And we got married in this tiny little chapel with only like 8 people there. So for me, like, weddings just aren't that big of a deal. And so for me to have to read an entire book regarding this posh wedding, it was like my worst nightmare. So I did find the characters of Olivia and Jono somewhat interesting. I did want to know about like their pasts and like their stories leading up to the wedding. But I don't feel like they were interesting enough characters to carry the entire book for me. And then it did take a long time to finally get to the good part of the book near the end when everything started happening and we learned like how everybody was connected. And then like once we got to the good part of the book just like ended. Like, it was just so sudden. We had all of this build up leading up to the murder that was alluded to at the beginning of the book. And then it happened, and then it was just epilogue. And for me, since I was listening to it on audiobook, they had like an excerpt from her next book at the end of the audiobook, and I didn't know that. So it said that I still had like 30 minutes left in this book. And so when the narrator was like, epilogue, I was like, it's over? Like, I still have 30 minutes left in this, and it was just over. And I was like, it was the most like unsatisfying ending ever. Like, I felt like I needed more resolution for this book that I had just suffered through. And I feel like since it was like a suspense novel, I wanted to be like nervous when I was reading it or listening to it, and I wanted to like actually be like, oh my gosh, what's happening? But it was so obvious like who were like the bad people in the story. Like the groom, I can't even remember his name now, but the groom, what was his name? But him being killed by the wedding planner, like it was just kind of like, okay, you know, like obvious, like why else would we have the wedding planner just have these random like pop-ups throughout the book if she wasn't going to be important at some point in the story? I don't really read that many like mystery type books, and so because of that, I was expecting to actually be surprised and actually be like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen? But for me, like, that just didn't happen. So it was just overall very unsatisfying, and I didn't like it, and I really wish that I did, but I didn't. The next book that I finished was Ariadne. So this book has skyrocketed to one of my favorite books this year. It honestly stunned me, and I was not expecting it at all. For me, it was such a fantastic retelling, and I just could not put it down. So the book centers on Ariadne, and it's told from the alternating point of views of her and her sister Pedera. And at the beginning of the book, Ariadne helps Theseus to slay her brother, the Minotaur. And then after that happens, like the book kind of transitions to what happened to the sisters during their lives after this event took place. So for me, I tend to go into these mythology retellings like not knowing the original stories. I like being surprised. So going into the book, I hadn't done any research when it came to like the Minotaur and Theseus and Ariadne, etc. So going in, I didn't know what was going to happen to the story at all. Then I did feel very foolish about like 25% through the book when it turns out that Theseus was the bad guy. I felt like I was just as fooled as Ariadne was when he abandoned her on the island to die. As it was happening, I was like, oh shit, why did I not know that was gonna happen? Like, if I knew the mythology, I would have known that that happened, but since I didn't, I was over here like, he'll come back for you. He has to. He was so nice to you at the palace. And it's like, well, yeah, he was nice to her because he wanted her help with slaying the Minotaur. I felt really silly. I'm like, probably should have known that. Like, I know vague, like, overalls of mythology, but I don't know, like, the nitty gritty. So then I didn't know that he was going to marry Federa, and then when he married the sister, I was like, I was just, so for me, reading this book and not knowing, like, the nitty gritty of the mythologies or whatever, I was very interested in the story, and I wanted to know what was going to happen because personally, I didn't know what was going to happen. So reading the retellings of her and her sister's stories through the different point of views, I thought they were both really strong characters. And unlike with Daughters of Sparta, I didn't find any of them to be like whiny or like annoying to read. Like reading both of their sections, like I did find it genuinely enjoying. And then also their writing style I thought was really similar to how Madeline Miller writes for Song of Achilles and Circe. So for me, I was like really pleased by that because I've love those books and I've been dying to read more that have that same kind of like lyrical writing sense. So overall, I'm super happy that I read this one and I really, really liked it. The last book I finished this month was Song of the Forever Rains. So I actually was really drawn to this book because of the really beautiful cover art. I do think it's very beautiful and I saw it on the shelf in the library and I was just like drawn to it. But prior to that, I hadn't like heard of this book at all or the author. I merely gravitated towards it because of the cover and then reading the synopsis on the back, I was like, sounds good. So this book centers on Larkra, who's a young sorceress and she just turned of age and she's sent on this like assignment by her father to fake a courtship with this old duke in this different part of the kingdom. And the father thinks that this duke is doing like illegal like magic siphoning. So she's sent to live with him to uncover his secrets. And then while at the manor, she has this connection with his stepson who is like, so the duke's really old and the stepson's like around her age. But the son doesn't know that the duke has like all of these like secrets. Like he doesn't know what's going on in the kingdom. And then there's kind of like this like love connection between her and the stepson. So this book, I feel like, so I finished it and then I feel like it's going to be just really forgettable for me. That's kind of the best way to describe it. Like I finished it and I was just kind of like, oh, okay. Like it just left a lot to be desired, which really bummed me out because I was actually really looking forward to reading this one. I was drawn to it because it was like this fantasy book with like magic, but the magic in the book was just kind of like this afterthought. Like it was a secret and the main character wasn't like supposed to use her magic because it's like this like secretive thing. But when she did use her magic, it was, she used it by singing. And I was just kind of like, okay. Like the only way for her to use her magic is by like singing a song and like singing it. And it's just like, it didn't really, I didn't love that. And I actually have a few more gripes with this book. I actually do feel like this book should have been a lot longer than it was. It just felt like there was too much shoved into a relatively short book. Like the world building just needed a lot more fleshing out. Like I feel like there were a lot of these deep things that the author was trying to do. Like she created these kingdoms and hidden worlds and like these creatures, but she just touched on them for like a page or like less than a chapter. And then she just kind of like quickly moved on. Like I almost feel like she tried to make things too interesting. Like the father was like the ruler over like this like in real life kingdom, but then he was also like a secret king in like a different kingdom. And then like there were the three sisters who were magical, but like magic was like not everybody knew it existed and it's something that you have to keep a secret, and not very many people like have magic anymore. But then they also are performers in this other secret kingdom, and then they have this friend that morphs from like a man into a woman and it's like this weird creature, and we go to their house and visit them once, but then they pop up randomly other times. And then they also had a stepbrother that was living with them that was briefly touched on. And then she also had like a magical hawk that would get really big and then shrink down, but when it was big, it could lift her and fly her places. And then you could also exchange like a year of your life to go visit someone dead who was in the Fade. Like, she had a lot of interesting ideas. I just didn't feel like they kind of all belonged together. Like, I just felt like it was just kind of like, oh, and then the hawk can take and fly her places because it gets big randomly. And it's just kind of like, okay, like, do you want to elaborate on that? Like, I feel like this world that she was trying to create could have been like more interesting if she had given more time and more pages, like, to allow for fleshing out of this world. And then another complaint I have is, so the main character, she has two older sisters, and harkening back to their powers, they use their powers, like, she sings, and then her one sister uses her powers by playing violin, and then the other sister uses her powers by dancing, which is weird, but that's not like my main gripe. The thing that I hated about the sisters is every time they would be together, the author would have them drone on for many passages, like trying to do banter between the three of them that was supposed to be amusing, but it wasn't. And then there would always be like this fourth person present in the room or whatever during this banter, and then the fourth person, no matter who it was, would always be like, oh, you Bassett sisters and your banter, like pretty much verbatim every single time, no matter who the fourth character was. And so she was trying to make it seem like their banter was like clever and cute, but it wasn't. And then having this other person in the story basically point out that their banter is cute doesn't make the banter cute. It's annoying, and I don't want you as the author to tell me like, hey, what I'm doing right now is really cute. Like, their banter is so funny. This fourth character totally agrees. Do you think it's funny? And it just wasn't. It was really forced, and I don't really like when books tell me that I'm supposed to find something funny or that I'm supposed to find something witty. So this book was designed to be part of a series, and the second book actually just came out in October of 2021. It's called Dance of a Burning Sea, and it's about one of the other sisters, the one that dances, to use her magic. But since I didn't really like the sister characters in the book, I probably won't continue reading the series because I doubt that it's probably going to change. Like, I feel like the sister is pretty much going to be like the exact same as the first sister that I read. So probably we'll skip that. Okay, so I do have two books that I got like almost halfway through and then I didn't finish them, which I'm actually really proud of myself because I am really, really bad at not finishing a book. It's tough for me because I feel like I get partway through and I'm like, well, I already spent all this time reading it. I might as well just finish it so I can know what happens. It might get better. But I'm trying to work on that, and I'm trying to get better at, like, if I'm not enjoying something, just kind of letting it go so that I can read things that I'm actually going to enjoy. So the first book that I stopped reading this month was Read Between the Lines. So I got this book free from Amazon's November first read selection, and I just didn't enjoy it. Initially, I loved like the setup for the story. So we learn in the beginning that the main characters have been DMing back and forth like through Twitter for a bit, but neither of them know who the other really is. And then we find out that the one character is a bookstore owner, and then the other is like, she's a part of a like property development company, and they're tearing down the building that the first main character's bookstore is in, but they're romantically interested in each other, so they have to like work past that once they actually meet in real life. So I like that they have like something to work past since they liked each other, but like ultimately, I just found it to be boring. Like, the characters didn't seem to have like much personality, and like the storytelling was just kind of basic. So I got to like the halfway points, and other books came up that I wanted to read, and so I moved on to those, and then I just don't really have a desire to continue. Like, I don't really care like how the story is going to resolve. Like, you know, obviously they're going to end up together, so do I really need to read the rest of the book to get to that point? Because like, I don't know, I just didn't feel a connection with the characters. So the second book I didn't finish this month was 1,000 Ships. So this book I just couldn't get into. I did recommend it in my mythology recommendations video, which I do stand by. Like, I feel like other people will like it. It just wasn't 100% for me. I got to about 45%, and I just was kind of confused by all of the characters, and like I had a really hard time keeping them all straight or like knowing who was who, especially since it's pegged as like the forgotten stories of like the Trojan War. There were all of these characters that I didn't know who they were, and then all of their stories were kind of like the basis of the same thing, like them being treated unfairly, and then like it just kind of got old and it wasn't anything like exciting or like pivotal for me. So I just didn't really feel the desire to move on. I do think that it was a really well-written book. I think there were just too many point of views and it just wasn't for me. So far this year I have read 63 out of my original goal of 52 books. So for the month of December, I'm super excited to see how many books I can finish. I'm definitely way over my goal, so love that. So thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye!